Welcome to my office, my prayer room, and today we are on Exodus chapter 6. This is Discovering Exodus, a 40-day journey, and I have with me a whiteboard today, so we're going to be really focusing on statements that God made to the people of Israel, to Moses, to let the people of Israel know that he is faithful. So I'm calling this chapter what I'm sharing, the faithful God, because that's who he is. So let's jump right in. If you haven't read it, make sure you read Exodus chapter 6. And as always, I have handouts for every one of the chapters on my website, Tschida.com. Go to the devotional page and you'll see a link even to this, to the videos. And then you can click to download every handout. So what I'm going to share today that's on the board will be in the handout. Alrighty, so today we are going to focus on Exodus 5. We saw, and we spent our time on just the discouragement, that Moses was discouraged. He thought God should move faster than he did, and I was just sharing how adversity really trains us. And so today we're going to just start in the beginning of chapter 6 and see what God's response is to Moses in that moment. And the Lord said to Moses, "Now you will see what I will do to Pharaoh. Because of my mighty hand, he will let them go. Because of my mighty hand, he will drive them out of his country." And then God goes on, and I'm going to focus on kind of verse 6 all the way through verse 8, first of all, 6 through 8. And this is what God is saying to Moses to let the people of Israel know, and to let Moses himself know. He says, "Say to the Israelites," verse 6, "I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians. I will free you from being slaves to them. I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with mighty acts of judgment. I will take you as my own people, and I will be your God. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God, who brought you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians, and I will bring you to the land I swore with uplifted hand to give to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. I will give it to you as a possession. I am the Lord." So the bulk of this, my sharing today, is just going to be focused on what God says about his I wills, what his promises are. And something that I feel like in that language is such covenant. I was reading through it, and I've been just, meditating on it. And I was thinking about when a husband and a wife, we were just at a wedding last weekend, and we saw this young couple standing before the pastor and all of their friends and family. And they're saying commitments to one another. They're sharing their vows with themselves before God and all the witnesses. And it's as if this is that same kind of language. Here's God's promise to his people. So I want to just take a look at it line by line, each of these I will statements. And in this week, today's time of reflection, we'll be just seeing how God has been faithful to you in these same I wills. So the first one is, God said, first of all, he said, "I am the Lord." And he said, "I will bring you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians. I will bring you out." And I just wonder, I think about from my own life, and this will be part of your reflection, what has the Lord brought you out of? He is faithful to what he says. He's faithful to his promises, and he loves you. He loves me. He loves my children. He loves your children. He loves your co-workers. He loves your spouse. And his desire is that he would bring them out, that he would bring you out. So he brought the Israelites out from under the yoke of the Egyptians. And that was the oppression that they were under. So in your reflection time, I'm going to have you just thinking about, what has the Lord brought you out of? And then secondly, he said, "I will free you from being slaves to them." So there are things that we are all slaves to in our life. We're slaves to sin before we receive the righteousness that comes from God, knowing Jesus. So what has he set you free from? What were things that you were slaves to? I think it's important that we remember our testimony. We remember the faithfulness of God, because part of the testimonies of what God has done in our life is he wants to do it. We say that the testimony means just do it again. Whatever he's done, he wants to do it again. The next one is, he says, I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and mighty axe. In your life, how have you seen God move in mighty, powerful ways? How have you seen his outstretched arm? How have you seen him come to your rescue? How have you seen his mighty acts worked out in your life? How have you seen the miracles of God shown forth in your life? Recount those. Remember those. Remind your spirit, your soul, what God has done for you, what God has done for your family. All right, the next one is, he said, I will take you as my own. You are his possession. I am his possession. I'm in his family. You're in his family. He's called us into sonship, daughtership. This is who we are. And part of that is, I'll take you as my own. If I am in his family, then everything he has belongs to me. And that's part of the inheritance that God has given us. He's called us co-heirs with Christ, co-heirs with Jesus, with his son, the perfect one. So as you meditate on, what does it mean to be God's own? Reflect on that. What does that mean for you personally? And he said, then I will be your God. Okay, so I have a little line here. God does it all. All of these things happen before he even says we're going to even know who he is. He's all about relationship. Jesus, all about relationship. Holy Spirit, all about relationship. And what happens is we belong before we actually fully believe. So even God's saying, here's what I'm going to do with Israel. I'm going to pull you out of Egypt. I'm going to pull you out from under the oppression. And he's giving this promise to his people, this covenant, his vows of what he's going to do. And he doesn't even say, okay, first of all, I want you to believe completely in me, completely trust me. Yes, I'm faithful. No, what he says is, here's what I'm going to do. The I wills. And he's faithful. So everything comes true that he says. He does all of this, all of it. So we get to belong. We get to be taken as his own before we even fully understand what we've been taken into. And he says, I will be your God. Then you will know. And that know is that word, that yada word. It's experiential knowing. It's that face to face. It's being vulnerable. It's being intimate. Then you will know. It'll be from that point that there's trust. It'll be from that point that there's great understanding that he's a God who loves, that he's a God who desires us. And then we will know that I am the Lord your God. And then he says, and I'll bring you to the land that he has promised from the beginning of the calling of Abraham. He hasn't forgotten his promise. So what are things that he has given you? What are the promises that he's put in your heart? What are the promises that he's given your family? What are maybe promises that even been given to those who have gone before you in your family line? He hasn't forgotten the promises. You know, God's timing is perfect. His perspective is perfect. His love is perfect. His acts are perfect. His ways are perfect. So we sometimes move ahead of the Lord, and we need to be asking God, is this the timing for what you've promised us to come forth? But I will hold on and I will wait, and I believe every promise that you've given me for my family, because he will bring us to the land. He will give it to us as a possession. What he has promised, he will be faithful to do. And he starts and he ends with the same statement. And we see this statement over and over in the Old Testament. I am the Lord. And the Lord, he's the fountain. I just wrote things down so I don't forget. He's the fountain of being. He's the fountain of blessedness. He's infinite perfection, infinite love. All he does comes from the source of love. He doesn't ever have a wrong motive. This is who the Lord is. And he wants us to know him. He wants us to know him in a personal way. He wants us to know he's a promise-making and a promise-keeping God, someone, the only one who we can fully trust with all of our heart, all of our lives. And this is what Moses goes to tell the Israelites. He's bringing a message. And what we see here in verse 9, and then I'm just going to close us up today. Moses reported all of this amazingness to the Israelites. He reports it all, but they did not listen to him because of their discouragement and harsh labor. And I have a note in my Bible, and I said, Jesus, just keep my heart soft and keep my ears ever hearing. I just don't want to miss something that you're doing, something that you're saying. And I don't want my heart to be hardened. I don't want discouragement to take over where there's a bitter root that begins to grow and I cut off my relationship with you. What we know in Ezekiel 20, and I'm not going to read that today, but Ezekiel 20 verses 5-9, you can look it up if you want, is that Israel was putting all their trust in the gods of the Egyptians. And because they were doing that, they had a hard time. They were discouraged. They were under the oppression of the enemy. And God tells them to get rid of all of these false gods. Get rid of your idols. Turn to me. And even when the Israelites don't turn to him, and we see that over and over through their time in the wilderness, God is faithful because he's a faithful God and he is faithful to the promises that he makes. He does all of it. He does it all for us before we even fully understand what he's even done for us. So I just want to encourage you today, know that he is the Lord. He's a promise-making, promise-keeping God. We know him as the Father, and he is for you. He is calling you, and he is in your midst. And his desire is that you would remember. So I just want you today to just go through, what has he brought you out of? What has he freed you from? What has he redeemed you from? How have you been taken as his own? What does that look like for you? How do you know him? So these are the reflections, just the reflection time that I'm going to have. Part of that is testimony. So there's a 2-part thing here in your little handout, in your time, your secret place, time with God. Just remember and go over the testimonies of how God has brought you from darkness into his marvelous light, remembering that he is the faithful God and he is faithful to everything that comes out of his mouth. It will happen just as he said. All right, I will see you in Exodus chapter 7.